Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the last part of this three-day conference. We are going to end off this conference with a very special guest, Kerry Gladue. Kerry, let me tell you a little bit about Kerry. So Kerry was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta. He is an intergenerational survivor of the Indian residential school system, as well as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. After spending most of his life in and out of the system, and after the death of his mother and sister, Kerry woke up in a prison cell. Broken and alone, he cried out in his cell for a second chance. Today, Kerry is a published author who shares his life experiences in his book called Second Chances, the Kerry Gladue Story. His story and accomplishments have triggered national media attention. Kerry is also an inspiring actor and is employed as a director in the same treatment center he healed at, Simon House Recovery Center. Kerry's second chance was at both Calgary Drug Treatment Court and Simon House Recovery Center, where he believes that his cry for help was answered over 11 years ago. Kerry is a husband to his wife Shannon and a proud father. He initiated the first Indigenous programming at his place of employment to promote healing and education toward reconciliation. He's left us a quote here. He says, "I had no idea what was ahead or if they would even be able to help me. I was so lost and alone and just wanted to die like everyone else was. The same people that I feared and resented were the same ones that saved my life." So Kerry, if I can ask you to come on screen. There you are. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome. Yeah, who'd ever thought I'd be doing this like 11 years later? But yeah, this is great. I'm glad to be here today and share a little bit of my story and give thanks. And it's me giving back to as well, right? To the organizations that saved my life, as you mentioned, the ones I feared all my life and resented and hated and blamed. And so thank you. So I'll just get started here. So yeah, I was my spirit name and my Indian name is Shaganapi. That was given to me down south here in Tsuut'ina Nation. I'm very honored to have that name. And when I'm talking today and sharing my story, it's a lot about, identity and belonging too, right? That's part of the trauma. My story starts before me, and I honor my ancestors and all the strugglers, all the struggles they went through with the residential school. My mom was taken at 2.5 years old and put in a residential school in northern Alberta, Gruart, called St. Bernard's Mission. So she spent, and I don't think getting into all the details and the trauma, but I grew up on that trauma. There was 3 of us. When my mom went to this school, she had a lot of really dark, nasty things happen to her. And as we know, a lot of kids, right, had this go through. We have lots of kids yet to be found in these graves, right? And some of those were my ancestors. So mom made it through this place, and when they closed, she ended up on the street. She had no skill. She was sent all over the place. I think she was like 16 years old, 15 or 16. She was impregnated by an RCMP officer who was a new recruit, and he left her and was transferred somewhere else. And she was stuck with this little guy. So I have a brother out there named Daryl I've never met. I don't even know if he's around or anything anymore, but never met or anything. But my mom, she always had that deep hurt, right? Mom got out of there, and after she met him and she was on the street, she had to do a lot of things to survive, right? She met my dad at a dance in Edmonton and fell in love with him and had me as the oldest, my brother and my sister. It's funny how, I'm 52 years old now, and I still remember things, right? I remember a lot of drinking going on. I remember lots of drugs. I remember, and I'm still, I still got stuff where loud sounds, yelling still trigger me, right? There's mom used to get beat up lots, and my biological dad would come home, and my mom would take us and hide us in the basement and under the stairs. It was a dingy old, like a cellar looking, and she'd say, "Your dad's home, we gotta hide it." And he'd come down the stairs with his big cowboy boots. You could still hear, big thump down the stairs, and he'd pull her by the hair, and he'd be kicking her in the head and beating her up, and we'd be pulling on her legs. Mom, we'd be dressed in those little onesie suits with the little flipper feet, and we'd be screaming for him not to hurt my mom. This went on for up to about age 5, and then he was out of the picture. There's lots of different men in and out of my mom's life, and then she met this guy one day, and I talk about it more in detail in my book with all of this stuff, by the way. And he was a nice guy. He treated my mom nice and treated us kids nice. We thought this was a family was about, and he would give us a quarter, and a quarter would last forever. We'd go to the store, we'd buy a whole bunch of little candies, and we'd still have change left over. So that was quite a while ago. And he was nice. And then he would start beating on my mom and hitting my mom. And one day, he'd locked me and my brother in the basement, and it was like 30 below in the wintertime, and we could hear, "You're gonna kill me, you're gonna kill me." And then we heard this loud glass smashing. And this was late at night, and me and my brother busted out the basement window, this little cellar. It was a little window. We crawled through the snow. We met her on the street. We're running down the residential street in Edmonton, and we're crying for someone to call the police and call 911, and nobody would let us in. We lived in a time in an area where it was hard for me to go to school all the time. I was fighting lots. I used to get called dirty Indian, wagon burner, savage, and people would always see the police at our house and always coming there for when the fights and the parties, and every time the police were there to help save my mom, it was her spouse's first cousin, who was a police officer, would show up, and he would be drinking with them and smoking drugs with them, and then he'd pass out on their couch in uniform. So I didn't get an early start on the respect needed for authority at that age. I didn't understand. My understanding was that they were no special and they do the same things we do, and so later on, when I talk in my story, you'll see why I didn't go reach for help a lot with some things that are about to happen. 7 years old, I'm the first time I remember, I was locked up in a children's center, and I didn't know why I was there. I thought, every time that we get taken away, I thought it was because my mom was murdered and they weren't telling us the truth. But I spent some time there, and I peed my pants. I was in this long hallway with beds with a bunch of other kids. I was so scared, right? I didn't know what was going on. I wanted my mom. And then finally I got to go home after that. Like many times, we were always returned home. We got home, and I went home again, and it was the same thing. I was a runner. I'd run away. I wouldn't go to school. I would run away because what was happening at school with me and my brother and sister were picked on a lot. And then what was happening at home, right? I was always running, trying to get away, and just get away from whatever was happening there. I didn't like it, but I all my life, it was kind of like that was normal living. That was life. That's what I can expect when I'm growing up. There was nothing more. This is the lifestyle. There's always going to be that. I started getting into solvents and like sniffing glue, gasoline, stealing alcohol and drugs at the parties that people would leave laying all over the place. People would be passed out at our house. So one time I was about 8 years old. Another year after, I was taken away again, and I was placed in a place called in Edmonton called Yellowhead Youth Center. It used to be called Westfield, and I had no contact with any of my family for almost 3 years. And I actually figured that was because it happened finally. My mom went through severe beatings. My mom was always cutting her wrists, overdosing. I didn't know the things she was suffering with how she grew up. I had no understanding till later years in my own recovery. She, I ended up in this place, and I had a first inkling of what normal life was. It was kind of institutional, I guess, but I got regular meals. I was starting to go to school in there. I had clothing. We never had anything, right? We were raised on social services checks and vouchers and stuff most of our life. I thought, that was it. She was gone. So 3 years goes by. I'm running a lot in the center. I was always running to some place. I'd never known why was I always running. I was trying to go find maybe home, what home was to me. I'd end up in Lac La Biche, Kikino, just anywhere. 10 years old, I'm stealing cars. I'm breaking into garages now. A lot of that just started just to keep warm, and same with the vehicles. It was just to keep warm and sleep in the back seat. And then when I learned how to drive, well, of course that changed. I can relocate at the same time. This was my life, as a little kid. I got out of there, I was about 12 years old, and I went home to mom, and mom was still with this guy, and one day my mom clocked him with an old phone and knocked him out, and that was the end of him. She finally stood up for herself, and he left. And there's a lot of drugs and alcohol that never ever changed, and I became the man of the house. I was like, 12 years old. I was the man of the house now, and I was the oldest. I was doing whatever I wanted. I had no structure, didn't know about anything, just clear sailing, whatever I wanted to do. So one day I come in the door, and my mom's crying, and she's like, mom was crying all the time. She was cutting her wrists in front of us and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, what's going on, mom? She goes, I had enough, Kerry. I need a break. You're just too much, she says. And I said, mom, you just had a break. I've been gone for 3 years. What do you need here? Right? I'm not doing nothing wrong. She goes, you're still fighting. You're drinking. You're doing everything. I says, I know. I said, I'll be good, So I went to run again because my mom had the living room area blocked off, and I went out the back door, and there was a social worker coming up the stairs, and she stopped me at the door and blocked the door, and she said, have a seat. And my mom's just sobbing, right? She goes, we're gonna give your mom a break for a couple of weeks. Have you ever went camping? You ever went fishing and stuff? It caught my attention as a young boy. We used to be promised that by the adults around the house, by mom's boyfriend. We're going to the lake. They would start drinking, and then we'd get nothing, right? They drink up all our food money and all kinds of stuff. We wouldn't get to do anything, right? So I thought, I can handle 2 weeks, So I'll go give my mom a break. So they took me to a group home in Edmonton. There's about 4 other boys there. It was a boys group home. There's a social worker that stayed there and looked after us. He was an older guy in his 50s. I got my own room. I started getting things. I got clothing vouchers. I had posters on my wall, stuff I never experienced in my life. I thought what normal kids had, right? So this was good until the workers started coming in my room and sexually abusing me, right? You do all kinds of stuff, and I would cry. I would barricade myself in the room, and he would tell me, look at you. Look at who you are. Who are they going to believe? And I said, I'm telling on you, right? But who was I going to tell? He was a worker, and how I knew the police, like I was telling earlier, who's going to believe me, right? The savage, right? So I kept that secret with me until I was 27 years old. Severe addiction, cocaine, crack cocaine. I was doing IV. I was injecting in my jugular vein. I was doing all kinds of stuff just to mask away all the stuff that I was going through, right? I never ever told anyone what was happening to me, and I swore I never would. So one day with my wife at that time, I had gotten married. I went to Drumheller Penitentiary. I had a 3.5-year prison sentence. That was my first offense as an adult, and I went to the pen because I was doing everything, right? I was any drug I could. I was overdosing. I had a police officer come to my door one day. She was looking for me. She said, "I had to revive you one time. You died on us." And I had no idea of it. And I was wondering, well, why am I free then? Why am I out? Why am I in the hospital, right? So there's a lot of hard stuff here, and I don't get into right now. And when I wrote my book, it started off with me just journaling while I was in jail, and looking at it later in my recovery. 27 years old, my wife would start telling me some things at that time in my first marriage. By the way, relationships were always hard for me. She told me something that happened to her, and then I told her finally the first person what happened to me. And by opening up that and talking about it and sharing it with somebody, it almost killed me because I never got no help with it. I walked into a police station in Edmonton on a cold day. I walked all the way down there. I didn't even have $2 for the bus. And I remember just trudging through the snow. When I walked into this police station, I said, "I got to tell you something happened when I was a little boy." And they gave me a piece of paper and said, "Write it down here." So I was scared. I went and sat in the corner of this at the police station, started writing away, and page after page. And I went up to the front desk and I handed it to the desk sergeant, and he started looking at it, and I walked out the door and he said, "Stop. You need to talk to somebody." So he said, "Expect a call." So I got a call from a major crimes and found out that, and I pressed charges on this guy and found out that he was still working in the profession. Like, I was 14 then, I'm 27 at that time. He's still working in a place with their 120 kids. And I wasn't the only kid this was happening. It was happening to all of us in that group home at the same time. He would do that to every one of us. And he had convictions going back to the 1950s for molesting children all over Canada. And yet he was hired to take care of us for 20 years in Alberta, right? So I did my part, and I opened up that. I put him away for 9 years. At that time, no help. I got no help for anything for all of that. No anything. I didn't get any help with that. Just a lot of more pain by doing that. And sometimes I wished I never even did that, right? The only thing that kept me together was, all the people I felt that I helped by not, and the future victims by coming forward, right? When I went to testify at the trial, there was 3 guys there that were in the group home, or 2 guys. The third guy had hung himself over this stuff years prior, and I never ever knew about that. Never knew about any of them. And I didn't know what was happening to them. We all hugged and cried together, and I told them I was so sorry for opening up this. I had no idea it was happening to them. Today I'm friends with one of them, right? We're on different paths, but we have a connection to that time, right? I held on to this, and 27 now, I'm going through the trial. I got major crime detectives always on me. It's in the media. It's on the news for people to come forward, and a lot of people came forward. I always try to, stabilize my life and do well. I've held jobs for a little bit of time, but, I was always doing drugs one way or the other, drugs or alcohol. I didn't know why. It's just who I was, right? I've been an addict since I was like 7, 8 years old, when the party started stopping and I wanted to feel different. The crime started when I couldn't hold a job anymore because of my addiction, and I needed to feed my addiction. My my nightmare was being straight because I didn't know what that was about. It didn't feel normal for me. Normal for me was just having a buzz going and going on with my life. That's how I learned to function all of my life. Later years, I woke up and I got introduced to crystal meth, and it did a whole bunch of weird things to my brain. And as we know, I thought I was invincible. I went from crack cocaine to crystal meth, and I went from hiding in the hotel rooms in the basements to now I couldn't be anywhere. I had to be out doing stuff 24/7. I was doing fraud. I was doing identity theft, counterfeiting, stuff I would have never ever done or thought of if it wasn't for the meth, right? Of course, that attracted a lot of people, the wrong people around me in my life, and and that didn't help things. There's that saying, show me your friends and I'll show you your future, that I heard, and I talk when I speak, because that is so true. I didn't hang out with good people, and I didn't listen to the people that were trying to help me. I got a call one day from my mom. My mom wasn't feeling well, and she had sobered up like a lot of years prior to look after my kids, because I'm in addiction, and my sister's kids, because she was in full-blown addiction on the streets. And she sobered up, I think, that was her second chance, right? She wanted to do good for the next generation, which was my children and my sisters. And then she got sick, and I was surrounded by the police, and I was arguing about a warrant. Someone gave me this idea that the police couldn't come in your motorhome because it's kind of like a housing, and I'm a crystal meth addict, and I'm fighting the police on it, the RCMP, as they're surrounding it, and I'm hiding a kite, and I'm using someone else's name. Now, how's that for an addict behavior, right? But I did the craziest things out there, which most of us do, right? It wasn't me. I got escorted out of town before they figured it all out, and I made it home. My mom said, I've been sick, my boy. I says, I know, Mom, you've been so sick. What's going on? You're losing weight. She goes, I did go see the doctor, and we sat on the porch here. She goes, I got 60 days to live. And I swore, because my mom used to always cut her wrists in front of us and overdose. We'd have to pick her up to the floor all our life as little kids, call the ambulances. And I thought she was just telling me that again as a sober woman. This was her pattern, right? She says, no, I got 60 days to live. I'm getting my kidney removed. I have cancer, and it's all over my body. Yeah, that was a very hard time for me, because my mom always kept, no matter how bad I was doing, or my sister was doing, or my brother, she would always have a spot for us. It was always home based. I was in and out of the house. I was dropping money off and all kinds of stuff. I was making money, so money wasn't a problem with my addiction. What was the problem? It was my behavior, and the only thing I could tell my mom, hiring the kite, and that I had 60 days to actually be with her, which I probably spent 3 out of that, is I hugged her as she died in her bed after she passed away. And before they removed her, I hugged her and I said, I'm going to see you soon. I was waking up in, ICUs. My mom cut me down hanging in her basement once, and my brother, and I knew that that's where I was going to be, right? That was my destination. And so that's what I did. And we got through her funeral, and I was, see you soon, Mom. That's what I'm going to do. By this time, I'm accumulating warrants all over the province of Alberta. I'm making counterfeit currency, and I'm stopping in every city, and I'm cashing it and doing all kinds of stuff. And I had wads of money all the time, lots of drugs, lots of people around me, lots of friends, right? And that's all I did. I had a pardon once, and when I was a tow truck driver, and I really screwed that up, because I started doing that lifestyle again, right? So my charges started coming back. As they started coming back, I wasn't, I was getting bail at the beginning because no records were showing. And then when it started coming back, I wasn't getting out anymore. So when after mom died, there's a big loss, where do I go? I got nobody, there's nobody in the world. I have children, 9 children, wasn't a father in their life. I was in and out of their life. One of my children's mom died of an overdose, and my other one, she committed suicide, which was all normal stuff in my upbringing. So she was gone. So I'm caught in another town in Lethbridge, Alberta, and I'm caught and I'm released for doing the same kind of things. And I make it back to Edmonton, and we just cremated my mom and got her ashes. And I walked up to the door. My brother's, "You got out?" I said, "Yeah, I got out." And then a police car pulled up. And it was just one police car. Like the things I was doing, and when I got taken down, it was usually at an intersection with tactical and stuff with guns drawn right at the lights. They jumped me. But it was one cop. He said, "Kerry, you got out, eh?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I need you to come in the house." I said, "Oh, okay." I thought I was being gated kind of thing, but I just got out, and they're coming to get me again, because that used to happen a lot to me. So we went in the house and we sat down, and I told my brother, I said, where's Mousy? My sister's nickname was Mousy, Selena. She goes, "I don't know. I talked to her last night, and I've been calling her all morning. She's supposed to cook dinner and come over for dinner." So when mom died, my brother stepped up. He took all the kids, and my mom taught him what to do, doctors and appointments, school. I really commend my brother for doing that. As the oldest, it should have been me, but he stepped up and he did really good with those kids, even to this day. The police officer told us to sit down, and he had some bad news. My baby sister was found deceased from an overdose a few blocks from our house. So that's why she wasn't answering the phone. When you cry when you lose somebody, it's not a normal cry. It's a howl. It's like a wild spiritual howl, and that's what was going on in that house once again, just shortly after my mother. That's leaving just me and my brother for our family that we known as our family growing up. Because the residential school, we didn't know anybody or any family. We had one name to start with, was our grandmother. There's people periodically throughout our life that came up as half relatives and that, but there wasn't a really strong foundation or connection with other family. I decided one day, when I got out, I asked my brother, I said, "I need to come home, bro. I need to come home." He says, "If don't bring anybody with you, you go straight to your room." This is my little brother telling me, "Go straight to my room. Go straight to your room and get better." He says, "You can do this." Right? He was going to go pick my sister's ashes up, right, at the crematorium. I remember walking out the bedroom and I collapsed on the floor. That's what I would do. I was in a convulsion. I remember getting really hot and coming out of a dark tunnel. And I looked up at him from the floor, and he was holding a box with my sister's ashes in it. And if his eyes could speak, it'd be, "Bro, you're leaving me too. It's just going to be me," right? I got up off the floor once I could, and I said, I called one of the guys I used to hang around with, and I said, "I need you to give me a ride." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'll tell you when you get here." So the people I hung around with, you don't tell them I need a ride to the police station. It wouldn't work, right? You wouldn't get a ride. So he got there, and I said, "Give me a ride downtown." And he rode me downtown. So we got there. I said, "To the police station." He said, "What?" I said, "You don't have to park in front. Just park, way across the street there." I gave him everything I had on me. He says, "What are you doing?" I says, "I'm done. I'm turning myself in." And that's it. Nobody could change my mind. I gave him everything I had on me. And I walked into that police station, and I walked to the front desk, and the desk sergeant was there. This is the headquarters, main police station, Edmonton. All glass front windows. And he says, "So what's your name?" I gave him my name, and he says to me, "You might want to go have a cigarette. Do you smoke?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Go have a cigarette out front. I'm going to be a bit." So I went outside, had a cigarette, had about 3 actually. I seen the guy that gave me a drive right across the street, the parking lot. He took off in a hurry. And then when I look back to the glass windows, there's about 19 cops standing there, and they're all staring at me, right? I don't think they thought I would come back in, but I walked back in there. I walked back in and they said, well, you know, you're not getting out, right? You're under arrest. I said, I know. I just had 55 charges come in from Calgary. When I got to the court, my lawyer told me I had close to 300 charges, and that was all across the province. I got transferred all over the place, Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, shackled left and right for weeks and weeks and weeks. Never in one spot. All those people that I thought were my friends, not one person come and visit me. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the money I was making. Not one visit, not one person dropped any money off in my account so I can get some food or anything, because I was hungry in jail. I was 145 pounds, like that picture you seen there. That was my arrest picture. I was sick. I was grieving now. I was grieving my mom, my sister. I was grieving my not being in my kid's life. I stayed in my cell for about a week, right? When my transfer slowed down, and I got a call on the intercom, Gladue, go down see your lawyer visits. So I went down seeing my lawyer. I said, what's going on? He says, well, I haven't sat where charges were read. I've been doing this a long time, and that'd probably be the most. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, close to 300 charges, a lot of duplicates and stuff. They'll figure it out later. But I said, I don't care about that. What am I looking at for time? He said 11 years. And, you know, I just looked at him and I was just like, okay. I walked out of the room and I went back up to my cell. I walked into my cell. I had a cellmate in there, and I walked in there and I opened up this book in there. It's a different way. It's the Bible, but like a addictions kind of Bible. So people like me, or little education or stuff like that, could understand it, and it had more meaning. I opened it to any page, just opened it. I was highly emotional. I was going through so many emotions. I've been an addict since I was 41 then. I've been an addict since I was a little boy. Only time I've ever detoxed was in jail. I've never had a medical detox, anything like that. And I was going at it for like 7 years on the meth straight. I would sit there and I opened it up and it said, if you pray with all your heart and soul. That's what I remember. Those ain't the exact words, but that's what I remember. And I got on my knees in my cell and I prayed to Creator, and I said, you know, I was so angry. I was yelling, I was swearing at him, I was blaming him, and you know, and I had this feeling, you know, I said, can I have a second chance? I just need one more chance, just someone to just give me a chance, you know. And I had this feeling come over me that everything's going to be okay. Just this feeling, something, that it was going to be okay. I started going to programs in there, and there's not much programs in jail, contrary to what everybody believes. There isn't down here. I went to AA meetings in there, and I went to a chapel where there was an old guy there that he'd bring us little candies and stuff, and he would talk to us. He was such a gentle man, and I struggled with anyone that was older because of my sexual abuse. But he worked in the jail, and he was so good to all of us, right? Years later, I would carry his casket at his funeral and be called to by the remand center, right? Which was pretty special and an honor. I applied, you know, I heard about drug court, Calgary Drug Treatment Court. I was told I got too many charges. There might be organized crime involved. I had violence from when I went to the pen when I was 19 years old, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, there's really no hope. And I was told by my lawyer that I was denied, right? And I said, well, I'm not going anywhere. He says, I got a deal for y'all. If you want to start your time, you can take 7 years. We'll get you started, sent and transferred. And I said, well, we haven't heard from drug court again since you reapplied. He says, no. I said, well, let's just wait. I'm not going anywhere. I'm starting to feel better a little bit. I'm maybe putting on a little more weight. I'm thinking a little clearer. I went through a lot of emotions in jail, and you know, I just burst out in tears anytime, and I started signing up to see the counselors in there, and never had any visits or anything, so that's what I did. I hung out with people that were going to the same meetings as me. I walked into you know, I got called one day to come and observe a drug court, and I thought, what? From what I understood, that's a good sign when they ask you to come and sit and observe the court to see if I even wanted to be part of that. And when I went into this courtroom, like, if anyone knew my history, they'd know that I've been in and out of the court since, like, you know, since they called it the Young Offenders Act, right, or Juvenile Delinquents Act. And it was different, right? I seen judges that were like kind of like parents, right, giving you guidance, and you know, say still with authority. It was a whole different experience. I was just like, what? Where am I, right? I said, yeah, I could check that out. They said, you can be here. You've been in this program a long time. And I said, well, you know, I could be doing something else, sitting in a federal penitentiary doing nothing except accumulating more unhealthy friendships and plans for when I get out, right? So I got into drug court. I got sent to Simon House Recovery Center. And, you know, when I got into treatment, I started looking at a bunch of things, right? A lot of people here at Simon House, many have been through the program. Many are just like me, right? And I started thinking, you know, when I started telling a little bit about me and my uniqueness, yeah, I did this, I was unique, I made currency, I did this. And they had names for them. Drug court had names for them. I guess it wasn't so unique. They were onto it already, right? So I couldn't BS them at all, right? And when I got to Simon House here, the guy who was doing my orientation, you know, I was such a paranoid guy. I'm looking around for cameras and microphones because I was always under surveillance, right? In my head, anyway. And he tapped me on the arm and he says, "You don't need to look for cameras and microphones. I already checked. There's none." And he was a staff here, and he understood my addiction and that, right? And I got along with that. I thought, well, maybe these guys are onto something. They understand, right? I did the work. I did whatever they said. I'm a full-blown drug addict. I sobered up through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I made it through program. I started helping people. I got a job for the first time. I was told, you know, my communication needed to change too. I had a lot of amends to make. You know, our step 9 financial amends as well. I called up CRA, I called up maintenance enforcement. Instead of screaming at them and hanging up like they used to do, I called them and I said, I owe you this money. How can I make it right? I want to make regular payments, but this is only what I could do. And you know what? The conversations changed. The dynamics of it, right? They wanted to help me, and that's what they did. You know, I got my license back, and then I was always hanging around Simon House, the treatment center, and I got a job as a peer, just a support worker on the weekends. So I was working full-time weekdays, and weekends I worked at the treatment center. I've been working here at Simon House for over 10 years now. I did end up getting hired by a Calgary Drug Treatment Court. I worked for them for 2.5 years. I was a peer support, and I also did their drug testing at jails and at the courthouse for the court. So that was an honor to be able to do that and to do my part, right, and giving back. I worked my way up at the treatment center here. And today I'm a director here of Indigenous Relations and Client Services. I have a great support team here. You know, I got our CEO here, Dr. John Rook here, if anyone knows him down there, has been one of like a mentor to me. And when those first 215 kids were found, he came into my office and he was just as emotional as me. And this is our CEO. He says, "What can we do, Kerry? What can we do? We're going to do something. Whatever you need to do, you do it." We have an 18-foot teepee in front of our main center as a permanent structure at Simon House Recovery Center. 11 years ago, I was told if I wanted to smudge across the street, because that's where everybody smudged. We have a ceremony room on property. We started an IFRP program, which is Indigenous Family Reunification Program, under the understanding that we can't help all of the children that have been found by the residential school system, or the children that can be are about to be found, the thousands more that we will hear about. But we can do something for the overrepresentation of Indigenous children in childcare due to intergenerational trauma. We've stepped up and worked with our partner and agency, which is Alcove Recovery Center, who takes mothers and children up to age 6 to go through treatment together. And Simon House takes the husband, the male. So we worked together. We had our first graduation here, our first success story. Getting funding has been, I just don't understand the funding part. We're doing a unique program that's helping people, but nobody stepped up to help our program. As a nonprofit agency, we have to struggle with stuff like that. I just never get that. But, we're making our way. We do GoFundMe pages. We try to get donors to come in and support this unique program. And, you know, we're saving lives just like mine. My story is not that unique when you're around it all the time, right? There's a lot of good success stories out there that changed their life. I have a beautiful wife now, Shannon, who works in the same field. And I have a daughter, she's 5 years old, that's never seen me in active addiction ever. She's seen me as a healthy father. And, you know, that's really special to me. Her name's Gracie, and, you know, she's my world. I'm still rekindling relationships with my other children that I love to pieces. Some are still struggling, and I always have to be mindful that I can't be taken down or brought back to my old lifestyle because of that, because sometimes we get held hostage to our past by even our family, right, and our friends. So I stay, you know, connected. My wife works at Alcove. She's been there for a lot of years. We have, you know, we both work in the field of addiction and mental health now. I went back, you know, about 3-4 years ago, and I started looking at my journals, and I was doing a lot of speaking engagements. I still do a lot of speaking engagements all across Canada. And I always promote justice. I always promote the programs that saved my life. All you guys, the courts, you know, drug treatment court. I have no problem, you know, in every speech I've said, I've always honored them for the people I resented for actually saving my life. There's police involved. I have friends today that are judges, police officers, prosecutors that I can call anytime. And that's, you know, you get that way for character, right? This year I can get a pardon again. I can start working on that, which I'll be doing. I go to the remand center every few months, and I'll be going there again. And it's kind of a special feeling because I can go sign in, walk in the front door, the guards say, "Hey, Kerry, how are you?" And I can hear they open the door. I go into the remand center in the front door. I go walk onto the units, and I go talk to guys. Some of the guys don't even recognize me. I've done time with years ago, and they're just like, "Wow, how the heck did you do that?" Right? And then I try to bring them into treatment and give them the same chance that I got, right? I believe second chances for everybody. And when I went over my journaling, that's how my book started. I remember being in the jails and growing up in the system all my life, in the correctional facilities, and everyone was always looking for hope in there. That's the first thing was me. I was looking for hope, something to make me feel better, something to take me away. And there was nothing in there, right? Everyone was lined up for old books from the 40s. And so I started writing this book, and I wanted to honor the creator in that jail cell and named it Second Chances, the Kerry Gladue story. I honor my ancestors in it, and I go really, really deep into, more deep than I have with you guys. And I also made it so that if you read my book, or if any of you have, I'm there with you reading through the story. It was a very hard thing to write. I had to go to the old places, the old foster homes I was in, and relive that stuff and think about it. And I was crying. I was sitting in front of some buildings where the police could have been called by there's some guy crying out front of our place, right? But I went through that. It was a healing thing for me. And I got this out. I said, I want this to go into correctional facilities, this book. They need to have this. This is everyday drug and alcohol struggles, drug addiction, not back in the 40s when it was just alcohol. My book tells everything from intergenerational trauma, healing, and how I got through it, and the things I went through and the struggles I went through. And I hope that it continues to do what I wanted to do in helping people. We have it in the jails down here in Alberta, and some of them, and I'd like to get it out to all the ones across Canada. Just to share that if I can do it, anybody else can do it. I don't have much more to say right now, but I want to thank all you for being here and for this opportunity. And like I said, when I do stuff like this, it's my giving back to all of you. And I thank you. Jail saved my life. Jail was the first thing. If I didn't get a chance to go in that jail cell and be arrested, I wouldn't be alive today. I walked into police stations in my sobriety and handed my business card to people, detectives that used to arrest me and chase me at all hours of the night. And I said thank you to them. I've made amends with them. So I make amends with everyone I've gave a hard time in that old life. And today's a different time. I'm doing different things, and I just thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerry, for sharing such a challenging and heart-wrenching story. You started off by saying, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And I thought, how very insightful and so very impactful that sentiment. So I'll certainly hold that with me and certainly pass that along in the work that I'm doing. You talked about a lot of grief and a lot of suffering, and you talked about loneliness and being in some very dark places, and certainly the things that you've gone through. No one should ever have to experience that. And yet here you are, still having the strength to advocate for your communities, writing a book, a tell-all essentially, so that others can, learn from you and can be inspired by you. And I said it to Paulette, the speaker previous, about your story being a survival guide, and certainly that is so true for you as well. So thank you. I'm just going to look at the chat, and we've got a comment here. What a powerful man, and thank you so much for sharing your story. And that's the sentiments that are coming through here. I invite anybody, if they've got any questions, Kerry, if you're okay to take a question or two. So far, nothing's coming up, but if people do have something, please feel free to put it in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'll pose it to Kerry. I'd also encourage you, Kerry, to look at the chat. There's some beautiful messages coming through.
Kerry, are you open to taking a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you. I'm one of the Crown prosecutors at the Brampton Drug Treatment Court, and to say that I've been moved by what you've shared with us today, it would be a huge understatement. But as I wanted to ask you, from a prosecutor's perspective, what do you think that we could do better in trying to help clients move through their program when they come in at the very beginning, oftentimes untrusting of the system, untrusting of, if I could put it, like, of authorities, so to speak? Is there something that you could speak to people like me who really want to help to make a difference, but are sometimes unsure the best way to go ahead and do that?
Well, I think it's just maybe removing the institutional part of it and more meeting people where they're at. I think, like what I mentioned at the beginning there, I was walking into that courtroom, like it was different, you know. It made me curious, you know. It wasn't, you know, even the correctional officers in there were compassionate. It was a whole different thing, right? The prosecutors, the federal prosecutor, the provincial prosecutor, our prosecutor would cry. She was, and she still does that, right? She would just get emotional, vulnerable with us, because she cared for us. I never witnessed that in my life, and I've sat in a lot of court graduations and seen that, and just love her though. But that's the realness of it. When you take the institutional out of the people that are so institutionalized, you raise curiosity and you invite them into, you know, safety. I think it is a safe place. And even working with our Indigenous population too, having that component in there in the courtrooms is important, especially right now with reconciliation. That should be in there as well. A big part of it, right?
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's really insightful, and I'll take that with.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions or comments. And so with that, I'm going to conclude this year's, the second annual AJTP conference. We thank everybody for joining us and, you know, tuning in for the last 3 days. We've talked about some really interesting subject matter, hopefully some food for thought. Hopefully you're leaving this conference feeling just as inspired as I am, and as I know some of our organizers are feeling, and that you are able to, you know, take something from this and perhaps apply it in your own work. Like Justice Barnes mentioned before, the content will all be up on our website. You'll be able to view it at your leisure. The slides will be there as well. We'll have contact information for some of the presenters. And I know most of them have indicated to the participants that they are very, very much open to hearing from you and helping in any way that they can. We've truly found such a fantastic group of presenters this year who are all willing and to share their expertise and their knowledge about the, you know, their subject matter, and have extended that to you as the participants. Both in allowing us to record this session, but also by providing their contact information and, you know, asking that you do reach out to them. So we hope that you do. We look forward to putting on next year's conference and organizing that. And we certainly look forward to any feedback that you have for us. Please do drop us a line. Let us know what you thought about the conference. Let us know how we can improve the conference. We'll try to put out a survey to all of our registrants and elicit your feedback that way. Wishing everybody a lovely rest of your day and a wonderful afternoon. And we'll see you later. And thank you for your comments and your support in the chat. We really do appreciate this.
Stop recording.
Great conference. What an awesome 2.5 days.
Thank you, Norma.
Oh, sorry, I was talking, but I'm mute. Yeah. Thank you for all of your help, Norma.
Trying to stop it from recording. Thank you, Sophia, for saying that. We really do appreciate those comments of support.
I can flip Justice Barnes a quick email.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon, for saying that. Truly appreciate the feedback. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Marie.